Hi, Tony here at Views from Man Cave, and today I'm going to be fitting a short seat and rack system from Down and Out Cafe Racers to a Triumph Street Twin. Now, thanks to the aftermarket parts manufacturers, there's lots of bits coming through for the Street Twin now. Down and Out Cafe Racers have created one of their short single seats for the Street Twin, which doesn't require the rear frame to be cut and have a loop boarded in. It's got a small rack that sits on the back. To go along with this seat conversion, I'm going to be using indicators, mounts and a rear light from Motone Customs just to finish the job off nicely. These are available from Down and Out Cafe Racers as part of the entire kit. Okay, so let's have a look at the constituent parts of the kit. Here is the short seat. I opted for black vinyl, diamond stitched, really beautiful piece of work. There you go, it's got a little Down and Out logo on the back, and it's really nicely finished underneath as well. You've got the tab to go on the tank and the fixing bolts at the back here. But that is the seat. Now, to bring the short seat to the same length as the standard seat without having to cut the rear frame rails, there's this nifty little rack section that goes on the back. And this can come in various different finishes. I've opted to go for all black. Now, one of the nice options that you have with the Motone indicators, they come with orange lenses, and in the box they also supply a set of clear lenses. The indicators come with an orange bulb in, so if you want to switch over to the clear lens, it's just a case of popping that in, putting the rubber seal back on and screwing it back on, and job is done. So there's a comparison between the clear and the amber lens. Personally, I prefer the clear one, so that's what I'm going to run with on the bike. Now, for mounting the rear indicators, there's several options you can use. I've opted for what I think is probably going to be one of the simplest and the neatest, and that is the Motone Customs rear shock mount. So it's just a small bracket like this. It will mount on the shock, and then the indicator mounts through there, bolts on, wiring feeds up under the seat. So a very neat and simple way of doing that. And then to finish off, you've got the Shorty mudguard, which comes pre-drilled with all the holes. Again, available in various finishes. I paid a bit extra to have this one powder coated satin black. You also get this section here, which is the mount. So this needs to bolt on to mount onto the rear of the stock frame. You also have a number plate holder, which goes on the back underneath here, and a nice box of all the various fasteners. One of the important things in this kit are these spacers, which will sit on here to enable that to mount nicely in the back, but we'll cover that when we get to the fitting. From Motone, this is the bait style tail light. Really nice. They do this in a couple of finishes. You can get it with a chrome rim or completely in chrome. I've gone for the complete black, and it is an LED light, so this is really nice and bright. Now, to save some time on the video, I'm not going to go through the process of taking the stock rear mudguard off. I've done that before in one of my previous ones, so I'll put a link in the end credits for you to go and have a look and see how to take that off if you've not seen that. We'll just dive straight in. One of the drawbacks of this seat is that you lose the latch on the back here, and actually to fit the seat on, it sits flush on this rear mount, so this latch part has to come off. Now, this is not really a problem. You can keep the cable in place, that's not an issue. So removing this is fairly straightforward. There's a slot in the arm here for the cable to run out of. You might need to just open that up a little bit. Mine was closed down. That's then just a case of compressing it slightly as if you were unlocking it, pulling that cable out and through. Do not lose that spring. That's quite important, so I'd stick a bit of tape or something over the end of that cable, or take the spring off completely, and then it's just a case of popping that off of there. So that can stay in place, and then it's two T30 Torx heads that you can unscrew, and then once those are out, it's just a case of lifting this away. I'm just going to put those two screws in there, put that in a bag, wrap it up, put it there somewhere nice and safe. But just to be safe and sure, I'm just going to wrap a little bit of tape around that to make sure that doesn't go anywhere. And then we're ready to go. And then obviously when you change this back, there's captive nuts in here just a case of screwing that back in. So before I get on with the rest of the seat, I thought I might as well put the rear indicator mounts on. Now in the previous video you would have seen I've already used the Motone shock dress up kits, so it is just a case of taking that 6mm bolt out of there. I'm just going to pop the shock off, and then you can just mount the indicator bracket behind, bolt everything back on. I've not bolted it up really tight until I get to the point where I want to adjust where these sit. You'll still see the thread from the indicator come through here, but I'm just going to put a little bit of shrink wrap sleeving on it to cover that over and run the wiring up. One of the things you did have to do, the pegs on the frame for the shock on a Street Twin are slightly wider than the old Bonneville, so these, you do need to open that hole up a little bit. They're soft aluminium, so just get a round file and you can round that through until you can slide that over. I spoke to the guys at Motones. I suspect they'll be bringing a set of these out specifically for the Street Twin as well, but I've got some of the old stock. So now that arm's on, it is just a case of feeding the wire through. There's plenty of wire, and then you've got to put the washer and the nut back over the cables, and then you've got the ability to obviously to run that cabling up on the inside here, sort that out at a later stage, and then you can adjust these to wherever you need to and then tighten everything up. As you say, you can still see this little bit here. I'm just going to put some heat shrink over that just to cover that up to make that look a little bit neater. Okay, so we're almost ready to put the mudguard on, but in the kit from Down and Out you'll get these top hats, and these are to replace the stock top hats that are at the front of the mount. They're just slightly shorter. The standard ones mean that the mudguard won't sit flush with the rubber mount underneath, so you just need to swap those over. Okay, to start with, I've mounted this bracket which you saw earlier on. It's the short bolts just to tighten that on, and then this section here will line up with the two stock bolts in the chassis. Now to mount these you're going to need the two Allen head bolts, which are the 30mm long ones with a washer and a nut. Now it's just a case of feeding the bolt down through that mounting hole, finding the hole underneath there. It is a fiddly job. It's difficult to get your fingers up there, and if I had £1 for every time I dropped a washer, then I would have paid for this kit already. Just need to persevere, get the two nuts under there. You can leave that tight loose for the moment, because there's a bit of a procedure to put this all together. As you can see, the cable that goes to the seat release, I've just looped it around and tucked it back down inside here, so that kind of keeps that out of the way. I've got my indicators lined up. I've put a little bit of heat shrink on there just to cover the silver thread of the bolt. They look, I think, pretty damn good. Now the trickier part about this is that these two bolts here with the spacers that sit underneath, they go on once the seat and the rack are on. So the next thing for me to do would be to fit the rear light and the number plate mount on here. Then we can sort out the wiring, and then finally we can get the seat and the rack all bolted up and done and dusted. Okay, next job's really simple. Here is the Bates light. You've got two small little 8mm nuts and bolts on the bottom. I'll just take the nut and the washer off, and then that simply pushes through the pre-drilled holes that are underneath. So once that's in place, the next part is the number plate mount. Again, pre-drilled. You can just line up the holes, push those through. You need to be a bit of an octopus to be able to get all these on, but let's just nip one of these nuts on the bottom. Okay, there, nice and simple. And again, you can leave that loose until you get to the point that you're going to do the rest of the bits and pieces. And obviously this part where the plate mounts, you can bend that however you want to. It comes relatively flat and sticks out, so I've just bent mine down a little bit. So now the rear light is on. We've got the indicators in. we've got everything we need to be able to wire this up. Now obviously you need to sort the wiring out first, because the last job is to put the seat and the rack on. I suppose you could put the rack on the back and then adjust the seat, but I've tried doing that and the last bolts are quite difficult to do. So this makes it easier for you to see as well. Now the wiring is the bit that's always the tricky part. Once you've disconnected the stock loom, you can leave it attached to the stock fender stroke mudguard, but then that creates a problem as to how to wire this up. Obviously, if you want to revert back to stock, you don't want to cut up your original loom, and I've found a solution to that. I've managed to source the same plug, which is the stock plug for the Triumph loom. I bought a supply of these, so I'm gonna knock a few of these up and I'll make these available for people to buy. It won't look like this, it'll look a little bit neater. This was just a test one that I did. Anyway, what this does enable you to do then is to just push this into the stock harness. It's just a case of following the colours to connect them up, and I will label them up. Now I don't run with a rear number plate light. It's not an MOT requirement here in the UK, but I have wired the loom to be able to accept that. So it's a fully functioning loom. Obviously, as I say, this one is a little bit messy. The new ones will be much neater than this, but I'm just going to make sure, check everything is working on here, and then we can go ahead, neaten up the wiring and put the rest of the seat back on, and we're good to go. So let's give this a check. Leave the ignition on. Well, we've got a tail light, that's good. We've got a brake light that works, that's fantastic. We have a right indicator and we have a left indicator. Okay, so there you go. Not the neatest job in the world, but I'm doing it for speed just so that I can get this done. Now with regards to sitting the rack on the back of the seat, there are two bolts here that you can do. I tried to put this bit on first, then the seat. Getting this lined up proved to be a bit of a nightmare, so maybe it seems easier to be able to do that. Then it's a case of putting the hook under the standard tank mount, pushing that forward, and then it's a case you've got to then just knock it into place to line these holes up at the top here. Okay, so these 4 bolts here go into the captive nuts in the frame, and then that leaves you with these 2 which go through to the lower mudguard, and that's where the spacers come into play. Now the last part is to bolt through from the top to hold the mudguard up in place. This is where you'll need the longer bolts that have got a collar on them, and you've got the small aluminium spacers. Now they're shaped, the flat side of the spacer goes at the top, and then the angled part will sit naturally on the slope of the mudguard, and then there's a little nut that goes on underneath that. So it's just a case of bolt and washer. So now you push the bolt down through, the spacer sits between the rack and the mudguard, and then you can put the nut on the bottom. Just do that loosely initially, do the other side, and you'll find that the slope of the spacer will sort of fall into place with a little bit of moving around. I'll get the other one done, tighten it up, and then we can take a look at the bike with this setup in completion. So there you go, not too difficult a job, a little bit fiddly here and there, but it's all nut and bolt stuff. The beauty of that is you can return the bike back to its stock form very quickly and easily. There's been no cutting or welding on the bike whatsoever. I think this seat conversion makes a huge difference to the aesthetics of the bike. It seems to shorten the bike and make it look a little bit more stumpy and a little bit more purposeful. The quality of the items are really good. There are 2 minor problems that this conversion throws up. The first one is that you lose the ability to unclip the seat with the key. It has to be unbolted. So that's a little bit of a minor inconvenience if you're used to using the space under the seat, or if you just want to access the battery or the USB port, that can be a problem. The second problem is the wiring itself. So if you want to keep the stock wiring with your rear mudguard and unplug that and just put that to one side, you've then got the issue with the wiring. I suspect most people won't want to cut up their original loom. As you saw from the video, I made up a small loom to replace that rear section. It was untidy, but it was one I did on the quick just to get the video done. I'm going to start to produce some better versions of those, and I have the first version here. Again, it's the standard Triumph plug. You've also then got the various lights setting out, so you've got the left and right indicators, the tail light and the brake light and rear light already wired up. And so I'll make some of these available. If you're interested in one of these, contact me. Either put a note in the comment section down below, or contact me on Facebook. This is neater than the original version, and it's going to save you cutting up the original loom when you want to fit either this conversion or, to be fair, any other kind of rear tail tidy setup that you fancy putting on the bike itself. Okay, so as usual, there'll be links in the end credits for you to go away, click on. That'll take you through to the Down and Out Cafe Racers website. I'll put a link on there to the Motone site. There'll be a link to a video that shows you how to take the original rear mudguard off if you haven't had a look at that already. And until next time, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.